Newcastle United smash Spurs 6-1 at the weekend at St James's Park, live on Sky Sports for the world to see. Newcastle blitz Spurs and Spurs fans out of the stadium as we score 5 goals in just over 20 minutes. 2 goals from Murphy, 2 goals from Isak, a goal from Joe Linton, and a final goal from Wilson to make it 6-1 and take a pretty decent step in the right direction in the hopes of seeing some Champions League football back at St James's Park next season. But there is still a few games to go. There's a few games this week. It's another 3-game week for Newcastle as we take on Everton on Thursday and Southampton back at St James's Park on Sunday. So there's 3 games I want to talk about in today's video. And it's not just current Newcastle players that are making headlines. John Joe Shelvey has been in the headlines. As it's reported, he has fallen out with his new club, Nottingham Forest. I want to talk a little bit about that, but more so on the great work Newcastle are doing on behind the pitch to kind of move players out in the January and what we are hopefully going to see us bring in this summer window. There is so many reports already for what Newcastle will do this transfer window, so I thought I'd talk a little bit about that. I'm not going to go through every player we've been linked with because that video would take hours, but I thought it would be fun to talk a little bit about that, especially depending on where we finish this season. And after what we did at the weekend, I'm hoping it's going to be up there. What people have also got excited about is a load of interviews that have been done outside of the Newcastle training ground. And it's not what the players said that has got people interested. It has, but it's the training ground in the background that's got people excited. We know there's been a whole host of upgrades, extensions added, refurbishment work. It's looking pretty good compared to what it used to. And Eddie Howe's spoken a little bit about that. We understand that they are making changes now while they also look for that move to the brand new state-of-the-art training ground. So I want to talk a little bit about what we've seen so far, what they're hoping to also do there, and is that going to delay the possible move in the future? We'll talk about that today as well. Welcome back to Toon Tuesdays, your weekly roundup of Newcastle United news. This is the series I've been doing for quite a while now, so if you're new to it, be sure to drop down and hit that subscribe button. I do this every Tuesday and try and cover off all of the Newcastle news. So, to start with, Newcastle won 6-1. It was a pretty good game, I'm not going to lie, or at least the first 21 minutes were possibly the best consecutive 20 minutes I've had at St James's Park. I mean, it's not often you see that many goals scored quite so quickly. And yes, Newcastle were pretty good that day. Eddie Howe, the players have all been absolutely buzzing since then. Jacob Murphy, the man who scored 2 goals, the man who, for many, wasn't good enough, is really, really turning up at the moment. And more than anything else, he's just a happy lad, isn't he? He's just living the dream, and I think that's what really shone through from that performance. Obviously, every goal was different as well. That's something I should say. Every goal was different. I mean, the through ball from Willock onto Isak from outside of the foot was just tremendous. But then you also look at the Shaw ball, over the top. Not a long ball, but over the top. Joe Linton brings it down. Early in the game, the first goal, Joe Linton cutting inside around 2 players. Murphy, the next one where Sean Longstaff cuts it back and Isak's hitting it from such a tight angle. And then you've got Murphy having a smasher from 30 yards. Every goal was different. And I think every goal epitomised what Eddie Howe is working to do to have this team create chances, and coming off the back of the Villa game last week, where we weren't very good. It's the first game I've not watched this season because I was a bit busy. I'm glad I didn't watch it. I think Eddie Howe must have gone, Rob's not watching this one. We'll take a breather, but he's back this weekend, so we better show up. It's easy to say in hindsight that, well, we lost that game, so everyone knew they had to go for it. I mean, it wasn't written. And yes, Spurs haven't been great, and, quite a lot of the media's talking about how bad Spurs are. Like, do you see how good we were? We totally thrashed them. And it was big. Because, and I do believe that had you offered, many Newcastle fans potentially a draw going into that one, some would have said yes, because Spurs are behind us at the moment. To win that game and really leave them where they were, and for us to take such a big step forward is huge. But it's nothing if we don't keep it going all the way through till the end of the season. And I will come on to the Everton and Southampton games later in this video. We'll go through the predictions and the lineup, so hold off for that. Instead, we'll talk a little bit about Jonjo Shelvey. Now, look, Jonjo Shelvey, Chris Wood, both went to Nottingham Forest. Can I start off by saying, it's not a bad bit of business, that, is it, from Dan Ashworth. He's a man who's been brought in because he knows what to do. Two players, Chris Wood, who really, hadn't lived up to the potential we hoped he was going to bring us. I mean, really, when we brought him in, it wasn't as much potential as it was. We needed somebody to play up front. And don't get me wrong, Chris Wood was a part of the team that helped us survive the Premier League, so I will always be grateful for that. But when you've got the likes of Wilson and Isak coming in, and even Anthony Gordon coming through, and you talk about Murphy playing instead of Almiron, we've got some decent options right now. Chris Wood to go for 15 million or more, was it 18 in the end? It's not a bad bit of business, and I think for Jonjo Shelvey, someone who was 6 months left on the contract, could have walked away on a free in the summer for us to get 12 million for him. It's not bad, is it? And the hope was Shelvey would kind of go away and have a few more years in the Premier League at another team. Obviously, Nottingham Forest are having a tough time at the moment, and it's now being reported that basically Shelvey's had a falling out over there. I mean, there's that many players. It must be tough to get involved and get along with everyone. And it is a bit of a shame to see, because, look, Jonjo Shelvey, I thought was going to be a huge part of this side this season. He came in looking as fit as he ever has. And even to this point, I mean, Longstaff's come in and done brilliantly. Joe Linton's been great. Willock's been great. When everybody's fit and everybody's firing, we're great. But there was points in this season where we quite could have done with a Jonjo Shelvey. So I'm going to let him go. Anderson's coming through. There's a bit of, but he's gone there, and it doesn't look like it's working out quite the way he hoped. And you think now that going into the summer window, it's likely that we could see a few other players go as well. It's really interesting, and I want to do a fully separate video on this, so I won't talk too much on it, but I think Newcastle will have the summer window that we need. There's conflicting reports coming out all the time of, will Newcastle spend this much, will they spend that much? There's rumours constantly of different players. Some of them are very exciting, don't get me wrong, and I do love to talk about transfers, targets, and what Newcastle can hopefully achieve this summer window. But at the same time, it will all depend on where this season ends. If we do hit that top four, and Eddie Howe's been asked about it, and Eddie Howe has given his Eddie Howe response, which is, we'll take every game as it comes, and we'll decide when the season finishes. If we do hit a Champions League, players who are being underused, like Ritchie, Dummett, Manquillo, we haven't seen Crafty in a while either. There's quite a lot of players there. I think Eddie Howe wants, Eddie Howe wants to make changes without a complete change to the side, and he talks about that a lot. But I think if we do get top four, you'll have to be flexible on that, because there will need to be some big movements. I think it was the Telegraph who came out and said that we're going to go for an entire overhaul, we're going to make all the changes. I think it was the Daily Mail who came out and said that we would make changes but wouldn't smash the budget too hard. I mean, the budget will depend on where we finish. If we hit Champions League, there's more budget to play. Well, we've got all the money we could probably ever imagine, but it will depend on the FFP and what we're allowed to spend. So we will see what happens. What's also interesting as well, if we get top four, is that it's got to be players from our own country, but there's also got to be a selection of homegrown players as well. So more conversation on Dummett getting a 1-year extension, because we need players who taken through the academy, and that's why there is just so many circumstances to what we do this summer. It's why it needs to be a separate video. But I thought the John Joe Shelby one was interesting. I think it was good that Dan Ashworth made those moves when he did. It'll be interesting to see what moves he does this summer for players going out, because we could get rid of Gillespie, Dummett, Longstaff, not that we would because he's been great, and then go, hang on, we haven't got any homegrown players, we're not even allowed to compete in the Champions League. And there is obviously youngsters you could pull through, but they don't need to be registered because they're under 21, so you may as well hold on to some of the older ones because you may as well have as big a squad as possible. You know, there's links to like people like Ivan Toney, who used to play for Newcastle. Now, I actually read that he was not be eligible because he didn't play at the club long enough. But you've got Fraser Forrester, who was at Newcastle and then went to Celtic, Southampton, etc. Could he be a goalie we could bring in as a number 2 or 3 because he was in the academy long enough? It'll be fun in games this summer, I'm sure. And what's also been fun in games is what the players have been doing down at the training ground. We've seen a whole load of upgrades. They've been playing football, volleyball, they've been playing football, table tennis. I mean, it looks pretty good, doesn't it? I have to say, comparing that to the videos of players sat in the wheelie bins, it's looking much nicer. And you think of going back to the transfers, it's all linked, bringing in players like Gordon or Bruno, coming over and going, here's what the training ground looks like, and then you've got bloody Longstaff having a bath in the wheelie bin around the corner. Like, you've got to make it appeal to some of these players. Yes, St James's Park is incredible. People will see the atmosphere, people talk about the atmosphere, but the training ground's where they work. That's where they are. 6 days a week, you know, that's where they're staying. And to have a state-of-the-art facility is something they're looking at. It's been great to see what's been done already. Eddie Howe was asked about this. He actually said that at the moment it still feels quite small, and they are still pushing for further refurbishment and extension. It's understood they are looking to put in an additional first floor extension into the training ground. I mean, you can see from the front that the skeleton still all looks pretty similar, but the AstroTurf that's been put down, no doubt further works to the pitches that they're on as well. What interests me is that, and obviously the club aren't going to come out and go, we found the land, we know what we're going to do now, we're going to move the training ground over here, but it was always spoken on the upgrades currently going on to be quite short term. Now, don't get me wrong, the brand new training ground will take probably years to build, so it's worth doing stuff to where we are now, because that needs to be... You know, you talk about how people keep saying Newcastle are ahead of schedule. You know, there was potential of going down, but we didn't. And then it was, can we get top 10? Well, hang on, now we're getting Champions League. It's like everything needs to go with it. If we'd finished mid-table this season, you know, the idea of who we're going to bring in the summer and what players can we attract and who's available, you know, that all comes with the hope of extending St James's Park for more seats. It comes with building the brand new training ground. These are all things that are part of this 5-10 year plan. And because Eddie Howe and the players are doing such a good job, it's like everything else is going to have to fast forward as well. We will see how we get on this season, but it's big. It's really big, and hopefully we finish in the top 4. But to do that, we've got a few games coming up. We've got Everton this Thursday away from home. Now, Everton haven't been having the greatest of seasons, but don't get me wrong, they are a team that's fighting right now, and hopefully Jordan Pickford plays, and hopefully he has a poor game, because the Newcastle fans always just seem to get in Jordan Pickford's head every game. But you let me know your thoughts on the game down below. In terms of a prediction, I think I've got to back it. I think I'll go 2-1 Newcastle. I'm feeling the win. I think the days of us keeping a clean sheet every game seem to have slowly faded away. But I think the confidence boost we'll take from the game at the weekend, you know, part of me thinks we'd beat Spurs before the game even started. There's talks about how Spurs weren't feeling great. Even the manager, the interim manager who's now gone, even he said that Newcastle St James's Park is the toughest place to go because of the atmosphere. It was like he was admitting defeat before he even started playing us. I think Everton will definitely be up for it. I think under Sean Dyche, they're a lot more... Well, he's just a lot more organised, isn't he, to how they were playing previously. But I think we've got enough in us to get the win. And in terms of lineups, it'll be interesting to see how we approach both this Everton and Southampton game, because Eddie Howe's not afraid of mixing it up. Just because Murphy scored 2 goals doesn't mean as he starts. We saw Callum Wilson score 2 goals against West Ham and he got dropped for Isak, which is great, by the way, to be in that position, to be able to mix things up so easily between players. As I say, when everyone's fit, it's great to have all of those options. So I think back 4 will stay the same. If I was Eddie Howe and I was going to make changes to maybe rest players, you could potentially look to do it at the Southampton game. I mean, there's obviously a longer rest between Spurs to Everton than there is between Everton to Southampton. But in terms of attacking positions, I think Isak's got to start again. I think Murphy deserves to keep his place. I think Almiron did okay when he came on. Obviously, I'm dying to see Gordon get involved as well. And against his ex-club, it wouldn't be a bad one. But we know what Gordon's like. And will Eddie Howe trust him to go out and play and not overdo it, not get a yellow, get a red card? So you let me know thoughts on the lineups down below. And then in terms of going into the Southampton game as well, I'll probably come back and do a preview for that later in the week. But it's at home, and Southampton are a side who are doing okay. We saw them get the draw against Arsenal. But if we play anywhere near the way we did for the first 20 minutes of the Spurs game, and you know, even after the first couple of goals against Spurs, yes, we're not keeping the clean sheets quite the same way that we did earlier in the season, but we're holding the ball so well, and we don't make it easy for clubs to score. That's what's different with this Newcastle side. And as much as when Spurs got 1 goal back, I was going, oh God, no, don't let them back into it. That's just my irrational fear as a Newcastle fan. Generally speaking, once we're up, we do okay. And I've got hope that we could potentially finish this week with 3 games in 7 days. Three games in a week with 3 wins. Let me know your thoughts down below. Let me know your thoughts on the training ground, how you think that will affect the hope to bring in players. Is Newcastle's surge for Champions League early going to have to force us to hurry up with everything else as well? Or will that take its time? Are Newcastle overachieving for where you thought they would be right now? I presume so. Where did you think we were going to come this season before we've had such a great one? And I suppose the question is, can we see out the season and take that top 4 spot? Let me know your thoughts down below. Thank you for watching as always. As I mentioned, if you haven't subscribed, be sure to do so. Thank you for watching. Reactions of the game against Everton and Southampton will be on the channel as always. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you later.